Welcome to this edition of the Two World Podcast. My name is Ken, and I'm blessed to be part of the podcast on this day, which could be sort of in essence called a holiday edition of the Two World Podcast, as you will soon see. We wholeheartedly welcome our two co-hosts.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jacob.
And I'm Barney.
And we hope you will enjoy today's podcast.
Yeah, one of the things that we're really excited about for today's episode is this particular episode of Northern Exposure that touches on the theme of Christmas, but so many other themes too. And so maybe I could just ask as we get started, Barney, could you tell us what the title of today's episode is?
Yeah, I was thinking about that throughout the day, that up until now, we have kind of had a time in our shows where we kind of analyzed the titles and tried to get at what the writers were going at. And I've been thinking about that today too, wondering if the writers were just trying to be clever with the title, or maybe as we talk more, if there is something deeper to the meaning that they chose. So the title is Seoul Mates. And the reason why I wondered if they're being clever is because the Seoul in Seoul Mates is spelled as Seoul, the same as the capital city of South Korea. And that really leads into the main topic of one of the main storylines of our episode today.
I tended to think they were being clever because it's so much more than if you didn't view the episode and just thought, oh, an episode about some connection with South Korea, and there is a lot more. It's clever. It is very.
Yeah, and I kind of was wondering, when this episode was suggested, you both were very quick to say, yes, this is definitely one of the ones we want to do. And I'm trying to remember, which of the two of you suggested it first? Do you remember?
I think it was you, Barney, because you really declared it to be quite possibly your very favorite.
Mm.
I'm sure it was in my little list, but
yeah, I think that when we were batting around the idea of having this as a regular kind of repeating kind of feature within the podcast, we came up with exactly like our lists of our favorite shows, because we couldn't do all 6 seasons maybe, but for sure thinking about looking at all the synopsises of the different episodes and trying to put those into a top 10, which became a top 11 or top 12 or so. Yeah, as Ken mentioned, this one was near the top, if not number one for sure, or maybe a tied for number one. And then again, we originally thought about doing a different episode. Then it dawned on me, oh boy, this one will be in December when we talk about this episode. We must do their kind of Christmas episode. The neat thing about Northern Exposure is they directly deal with a few different holidays, but they only do it once. There's no reoccurring Christmas episode or Halloween episode. They do have a Halloween episode and a Thanksgiving episode, but they only talk about that holiday or that tradition directly only one time throughout the 6 seasons. And this happens to be the time where, how does the episode open? It opens with pictures of ravens, stylized ravens in the Pacific Northwest. Probably, I don't know if we can assume, but probably Tlingit style of art being hung around the town. And right away, we're thinking there's Christmas lights, but then there's also these black birds going up here. And what is this episode going to be about? And thankfully, we have Chris to kind of usher us in to the tradition that we get introduced to of how the raven is connected with the Christmas season in Sicily.
Right. Yeah. And then, it's a great lead in to the eventuality of Marilyn um, giving us the story. On a personal note, Barney, um, wife Angie and I, this one is already out in our Christmas pile of videos that some families watch as a traditional thing. It's one that we just never miss because it's unlike any other.
Right. Yeah. I have, again, this is one thing that I'm always excited to talk with other people about, because I haven't had the chance to do that with these Northern Exposure episodes, but it's really one that I always look forward to. And I thought maybe I had caught or thought about everything that there was to think about in the episode, but watching it, thinking about how we would discuss it today, then I realized that there's probably even more that I missed. And thinking about it from kind of the point of view of how we'll talk about today, then I realized, yeah, I think there really is a lot more to it than what I even thought that there was.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah. How did the episode? Can you kind of think back maybe to the first few times that you saw it? How did it strike you? Do you think right away, or off your initial kind of reactions?
When thinking about this is happening to Maurice and dismissing the elements of Christmas, I felt it fit well with his character. He is the quote worldly guy. He was in Korea. He is military. He is aviation, and that this might occur was certainly no surprise. That he might have a child somewhere. And the way they bring his son into it as an adult, I thought was particularly impressive. That Maurice is not dealing with a child here. He's going to have to deal with this person as an adult. And they also give dialogue for Maurice as to the loneliness at Christmas time. The suicide rate increases, and it becomes clear that they're providing this opportunity for him to be not lonely, but yet the way he responds initially is no surprise at all. What are your feelings of?
Yeah, that's interesting because, yeah, exactly. He gives that speech to Chris right in the very first scene, I think, when he says how, every kind of following it with your first point there, he says like every other day of the year, you feel like you're important, and like, what you have and what you do and who you are is what makes you. And then suddenly Christmas comes around and you don't have a family. And he pointed out, you feel like somehow you're the vagrant now. You're the one who's looking in, with jealousy and longing at the things that these other people have. And I never put it together. It didn't occur to me that he's saying that he wants a family, and that in the episode he gets what he wants. He gets a family. I never put that together, that he's saying so very early at the beginning of the episode that this is kind of his Christmas wish. And and it isn't too long that he gets it. And yeah, like you say, he reacts the way that we think that Maurice, of course, would react to something like this.
Right. And I enjoyed the fact that they utilized the wisdom of Chris in then two subsequent important conversations, one about the concentric circles. And as you move away from the center, you become closer to the other. And Chris kind of finalizing that conversation by saying it's learned behavior, Maurice, and it can be unlearned. And then the revealing right there, right in your face of Maurice's prejudice when Chris says that he's not white, and how Maurice eventually deals with that and reconciles.
Oh yeah, what a scene!
Yes.
A number of times in my my studies for my master's degree, we came across this idea of the other, and I think that maybe it was kind of a new idea for some of my classmates. But of course, for me, right away, it's like, oh yeah, it's from Seoul Mates. And The thing that, so I even mentioned that episode a few times in class discussions, but and one of my professors thought, boy, this Northern Exposure series is something that I need to look into. Yes, you really do. Um, but yeah, that scene is huge. It is one of the top scenes of the whole series for sure, maybe beyond this show itself. And I think that one of the most powerful things about that scene is when Chris lays it out for him and Maurice is kind of thinking, what's your point? And then Chris says, well, it's learned behavior. You can unlearn it. And then Maurice, the actor for Maurice does this great job doing kind of a double take, or he hesitates. He's about to argue. He's about to put forth his point of view that he's still right, and he closes his mouth, and he realizes that he's wrong, and that Chris is right, and he has been wrong for the whole episode, and he needs to reevaluate the way that the approach that he's taking to learning about having this family, having them stay at his house.
I love that you pointed out the hesitancy where he begins to speak. It's almost akin to the scene then near the end of the program with Grandma, with Mom, where he finally reconciles himself to the wonderful person she is, and then there's that hesitation there where he looks into her eyes and says, "How are you?"
Yeah.
If your eyes don't well up, it was just crafted so beautifully to say he can and will change a bit.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. How did some of, in your opinion, Jacob, how was it for you to, it's a lot to take in. Ken and I have the benefit of having seen this episode so many times that, you probably felt like maybe a ton of bricks was hitting you throughout this episode with all that they're throwing at you. What were some of the things that you gleaned and really absorbed as you were watching this episode?
Well, at first, with the Maurice storyline, I was very nervous that he was going to offend and really hurt the feelings of his family that he didn't know about. And from the moment he meets them, when he's asking, "What do you want?" and his posture is very incredulous and adversarial almost, or skeptical. I thought, oh no, like I was cringing. But then I kind of have learned that this show has a soft side to it. And so they put you in uncomfortable situations, but a lot of times there's something like redemptive or good that comes out of them. So I kind of, even though I was nervous, I'm like, there's probably something that's going to happen in this journey that's good. So, but no, I think that was a very important and beautiful part of the episode, and just the purity of intention of Maurice's son who wants to meet his father. And you kind of realize that as you go through the episode and see them start to know one another, and when they arm wrestle or when they're trying to communicate through signs and simple phrases that he just really desires to know his biological father, and that comes through to Maurice, and that softens his heart. And I love too how Maurice's grandson that he didn't know about quickly seems to plug into the town and his going places with people, and with Ed, I think, or at certain points he's going here, there, and just his own curiosity. He's a little bit more capable of navigating the situation because of his command of English, but it's neat to see his presence too. All three of them, all three in that family, the grandson, the son, and the mother, all have a unique way of relating to Maurice, and each kind of softens him, I think. Although the mother challenges him and is more direct at times, but No, that was very powerful. Yes.
What do you guys make of the "Fly Me to the Moon"? It's really the only English he's going to speak in this, other than an occasional word. And he took the time to learn the entire song in English. Is it just this gift to Maurice that I spent the time to learn this? Or are we to derive something else from that?
Yeah, I wondered when I saw that. So I have not spent much time in Korea, just a few days, um, but I believe that there's a lot of overlap between hobbies and activities and outings between Korea and Japan. So I sensed that probably in his life, probably hanging out with his work friends or his just friends or growing up, it's probably a really popular song to sing in karaoke. And so I have the image that maybe it's one of his favorite ones. In Japan, it's a really popular song
Hmm.
to sing. And so I just my notion was just that he knew the song from singing it in his life, but then he knew what the words meant, or at least the "I love you" part, or the "kiss me daddy" part. He's doing his best somehow that he can to show his emotion that he feels, which is fantastic because it's so funny at the beginning when, like, Jacob is pointing, he says, "What do you want?" And then they're like, "Pork chops," and then, or like a milkshake, and for sure we see from Maurice's stern demeanor that he's really ready to defend himself, and he actually lays it out, later. But he kind of thinks that maybe they're just there really just to meet him, and whatever it is about Maurice or about maybe hearing stories growing up, if we can explicate that much, that his son really admires and looks up to his dad so much that he wants to express this emotion that he's been feeling for him, because he was excited when he told Bang to, it's now a good time. Let's put the tape in. I really want to sing this song for my dad, you know, and that was something he'd really been looking forward to. And me too, like Jacob said, I still feel it. The family is giving and giving and giving and trying their hardest just to get Maurice to understand why they're there and what they want. And he just can't get past the fact that, at that, for most of the episode, that their circle is too far away from his circle and what he had hoped for a Christmas gift, and that stern face that he has when his son sings those lines, and you just look like, this is early 90s TV, and Maurice is so conservative, and you just see that look that he just thinks, who is this guy and how can I get him out of my life? Almost.
Barney, you had shared a few questions with us
Mhm.
before the episode that I thought were really good, and I was wondering if we could delve into those. Um, and did you and Ken already touch on the idea of why they chose the Christmas episode to give Maurice a family?
Not exactly. No, I mean, we just happened to mention in passing the very first scene where Maurice is talking to Chris, saying that sometimes around Christmas time you feel like an outsider if you don't have a family. But yeah, thinking about that in preparation for today, when we were going to watch this episode and talk about it, I thought they could have done this episode anytime. It didn't have to be Christmas, and I actually don't have any real good idea about the answer to this question. So I'm more curious to hear what you guys think.
Ken, do you have any thoughts on that one?
Well, when I was pondering it, because this episode deals with a hint of Christianity, a hint, these various hints of cultural celebrations for holidays. I tried in my own mind to make this somewhat akin to the Christians' celebration of the birth of Jesus. These people traveled a long distance. It's certainly a gift. The gift, like Jesus, was met in many circles with trepidation and rejection. But in this particular case, in the end, acceptance became real, and acceptance became not only real, but became a loving real. So that's where the question took me. Whether they intended this or not is certainly up to debate.
Wow, I think that's really insightful. Yeah, because if you look at the story of Jesus, there was misunderstanding around his birth and uh, how people viewed his family. Mary conceived Jesus immaculately, or in a very special way through the intervention of the Holy Spirit, and so it took Joseph a while to understand the purpose in that. He had dreams, and then eventually, he gets to the place where he can be supportive, and then it's interesting to think about. Yeah, the journey that Maurice goes on. It takes him a while, but the signs are all there that this is genuine, and the love is there, and it takes him a while to open up to it, but then he does. And I think that's a great insight, Ken. And you're right, the part about the journey, they traveled so far to get there. That's fantastic. And one more time, Barney, what is the title of the episode?
Seoul Mates.
Seoul Mates. So, okay. So it doesn't necessarily tie in with Christmas directly. It's more the connection of how Maurice knew the mother of his child through Korea. I see. Okay. But is there a play on? I mean, maybe it's probably not the case per se, but soul being a spiritual element to it. I don't know. I mean, I know it's spelled soul as in Korea, but is it playing off the word soul? Is there some spiritual aspect to this episode with it being, there's a lot unpacked in this episode related to spirituality and faith in a subtle way, and it's kind of interesting that word is nodded to indirectly. Yeah. Did you feel, Barney, as you saw that, did you feel like it worked, them introducing the family during Christmas?
Yeah, and then especially what Ken just unpacked for us, then it all kind of really, I can see a lot of great symbolism that they're representing, and related to Christmas and the holiday and the story. And then when Ken was speaking, I had the idea, I wonder if kind of in a way Shelley is kind of narrating the story a little bit, as in her story, she's missing Christmas so much. And when we see her talking about Christmas, she's talking about little aspects of Christmas, like piece by piece. And I'm thinking about the part where she is setting up her nativity, and she's talking about the wise men and about bringing gifts. And now I can see that maybe, with the connection of Maurice's family traveling, that they could really be representing, this, the Holy Family in a way. And, we don't know, we don't know anything about, Bang came without his mom, so we all have single solitary parents here that are being represented. And it really does kind of make us think of a less traditional family and less traditional beginnings to the family, and wondering about that. And yeah, when I hear that, and And then also the idea, of course, when we hear soulmates, our first idea is thinking of that connection, that, the common phrase of someone being a soulmate, or sharing, feeling a connection through your soul with someone. And I can now see that it really feels incredibly appropriate that they gave him his family in the Christmas episode and not on just some other general episode, because the title could have worked anytime, but then using it as the Christmas episode really does really have a lot of extra meaning, I think, thanks to hearing what your response is.
It would be so amazing to somehow reach out to the writers of that Emmy-winning episode and say, these two gentlemen have a podcast, and we really try to, in our own way, put ourselves in your brain, and just to have them here to, especially this episode, say, come together. And are we reaching too far?
Right. Yeah, this is just an aside, but part of me sometimes did think about the episode where Chris is getting his master's degree, and where his one professor accuses him of kind of reaching it too far and putting too much meaning in something that didn't belong there. So, but I think in our case, that we're probably, I think that, this is an earlier episode, and I think that they really did write a lot of meaning into this episode intentionally.
That is a good point, though, Barney, because I know that the one episode, I think it was last time, we were really delving in to Jung, and maybe some of the depths of the comparisons we're making were not there, but it's still kind of fun to push it out, to the nth degree, to see, well, what if you apply this idea to this part of the episode or that part of the episode? Sometimes you see interviews with famous directors or screenwriters, and they'll tell them about a fan theory or a fan question. They're like, yeah, the fans are very creative. Sometimes they come up with things that we had never thought of, but that's the beauty of art. There's all this freedom to interpret it in different ways. And so,
yeah. Well, it certainly changed a lot of the way I watched these in preparations for what you guys do. I'm thinking like when she was sort of angry at Maurice and expressing her sadness, Maurice was poised up here in his library, looking down on her. And, my mind goes to, still he wants that position of superiority. And maybe it was not intended at all, but maybe it was. But I do think those things because of the way we dive into these.
Yeah, it's a good point, because it did, the episode, that scene does start where he's just sitting at his lonely desk drinking tea, when he could be drinking tea with his family. And then, and then he gets up and exactly goes to that higher point, right, in his study, right? But yeah, I liked that. I from the few people from Korea that I have met in the time I've spent the few days in Korea, and then of course, there are people from Korea here in Japan, and observing how their family dynamic works. It's not unusual for the mother, especially the grandma, to speak her mind and let someone know when they're being rude, in a way, and kind of get everything cleared and kind of out in the open. And what a great thing it was that she did that. That finally led to Maurice, understanding, putting everything together that he had learned, especially through Chris, and bringing us to back to the brick, where he and his son are sharing, some time together, just some father-son time. And how great it is that to see them connect with, actions and words, cognates, words that kind of sound similar, so that they can put together what a little bit of each other's background, and here's his son who we still see loves and respects his dad and wants to challenge him to an arm wrestling, and then there's you see on in other books and plays and other movies and TV shows, whatnot, that moment where, the dad and the son are saying, who is more superior, and is this the moment when the son kind of takes over? But no, Maurice is still
Still wins.
Maurice is still stronger, right? You can't beat your dad. You can't beat your old man that easily. So
yeah, and the two give Maurice the appeasement of being able to feel for that moment that this young man is a man's man in some regards, as he shouts out over the brick, he's an engineer. Oh.
That was a special moment when they were just the two of them together, and Maurice is learning about him and his profession and his personality and his sense of humor, and he's admiring him and becomes proud of him. And that is a very special moment because the son also can tell in Maurice's response that his father is appreciating him and accepting him. And I love that moment. That was one of my favorite moments of the episode. Their time there, sitting across the table together. Another really interesting part of the story, as you said, Barney, relates to Shelley and her longing for certain Christmas traditions that she had growing up, of going to Mass. And for her, that's something that makes Christmas especially meaningful. And we see that throughout the episode, there's all these different traditions. There's this storyline of Joel with the Christmas tree, and should he have one or shouldn't he have one? And then there's all of the parts of the tradition surrounding the raven and the telling of the story of the raven bringing the ball of light, to the world. And I guess I would love to spend a little time with your question that you sent us before we started recording of, like, what are Christmas traditions that we value personally, and then maybe we can make some connections with ones that we see in the episode, if that's okay. So while you guys are thinking, do you mind if I start?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One of the traditions that we have at our house that's very special is we decorate the Christmas tree. And every year, it's one of my favorite things that we do. Typically the weekend after Thanksgiving, we go to Lowe's and pick out our Christmas tree. And then we come back home, and Micah and Aubrey and Hannah will get out decorations that we've collected over the years. Some of the decorations going back to Katie and my childhood, things that we got from our parents and things that we used to hang on the tree. Now our kids are hanging on the tree, but then also so many decorations that they've made over the years, or that they've picked out. And so we put on Christmas music, and Katie and I normally sit. Well, we put on the lights. We mount the tree, we put on the lights, and then we sit back and we watch the kids decorate the tree. And so this is what they did this year. These are pictures from this year, and it was so meaningful. And it's so interesting too for the pets. They get really excited. There's our dog Jojo, and she's just right there watching everything. And then our cat Bam Bam afterward just loves to be near the tree and sleep on the I'm trying to think, the skirt of the tree. It is very unique, that tradition, and it's one of my favorites. And I know we can make some connections to the episode related to trees, but I just wanted to share one more real quick, and then I'll stop sharing my screen. And this is a tradition I share with Ken every year. For Christmas Eve, we always wear the same tie.
Okay.
And we've been doing this year after year after year. And it's just something I actually look forward to. It seems like a small thing maybe, but it's so fun. The only thing is, if you observe closely, in Ken's version of the tie, Joseph is wearing a green cloak. And in my version of the tie, Joseph is wearing a red cloak. So, you've got some subtle changes there, but it's just so fun as a tradition each year to do that. So those were a couple that I wanted to share with you guys. So
great. It didn't make my list, Jacob, but the fact that you've kept ornaments through the years. Yeah, I've got a couple from elementary school that somehow made it through the years. And it's fun to open that little plastic crate and just start looking at those and before they even make it to the tree. So I think your kids are really going to look back on this with great fondness. That looked great.
Yeah, it's funny how ornaments especially are such artifacts and such kind of memory keepers. And yeah, I certainly have so many associations with the ornaments that we have back home in Ohio. And I remember giving a card to Ayako, early on when we were dating, maybe partway through our time dating, and the card like became, you could punch it out and it would become an ornament, and thinking that one day maybe we'll have this for our tree, in the future. And yeah, we're just getting started with our kind of ornament nativity, our ornament narration that we have here, our story that the ornaments tell about our lives. But that was one that I really thought that maybe was pointing to something. And I think for me, the biggest thing Christmas wise is always the music. I always am so excited and always look forward to Advent season when we can sing all of the songs that I remember growing up. And here in Japan, when I go to the Yachio Bible Baptist Church that we have here, it's kind of like if you're not there, you'll miss it. We only do each hymn about, that since there's a structure to the worship service, that we only do each hymn one time, throughout the Advent season. So if you weren't there that Sunday, or if you weren't paying close enough attention, really soaking it in, then you'll miss that. And then you think, oh man, I was looking forward to that hymn, and I had to wait. Maybe we'll get to it again on Christmas Eve service, but I've got to wait another year, maybe. And there were a lot of hymns that I always loved, that we sang when I was little, but that maybe we don't have time to fit in to the Advent services here, especially as some hymns that we sing here are different from what I'm used to and from what I heard growing up. And then it kind of makes me think about the other question that I had related to Christmas and traditions. Were there new traditions or other traditions that are unfamiliar to like what the Raven tradition is for us that you have experienced in your life? And again, I can go first while you guys are maybe thinking about that. The first one that I really ran into was when I was in Thailand in 02, the Christmas of 02 in 2002, and that was when some girl that I knew there, she said, "Oh, it's Christmas Eve. Did you want to go out and hang out today?" And I was like, "Well, wait a minute. What about your family?" And she's like, "What? No, this is a time where couples get together and go out, and it must be something that expands throughout Asia, because it's the same tradition here in Japan, where Christmas Eve is a time for people to, make a reservation at a really nice restaurant and, order the set meal and, the not multiple course meal together and get together as couples, instead of families. And even in going back to Thailand, even the family that I lived with, in a homestay, they were Christians, but both of them were pastors even. And for them, Christmas morning was it's just another day. There weren't nearly the tradition or the expectation that is surrounded with, the preparation and the excitement. Of course, they understand the importance of Christmas and what it means. But the celebration that we have connected with it in the U.S. wasn't there. And yeah, and then those were some of the things that especially stuck out to me that were different, that I hadn't ever been exposed to, but I can see really nice things to take away from those experiences, especially maybe thinking of Christmas as a time to focus on, how it is that you became a family in the first place, to really give a lot of extra emphasis to your spouse or to the person that's dearest to you in that way. And I remember we had someone from the Philippines even at our church at Yachio, and Kimiaki Sensei, the pastor there, he asked her about Christmas in the Philippines, and she also said that it's not so emphasized, and that people there at her Baptist church said that you're supposed to think of Christmas as being every day, and so then the celebration is supposed to be an ongoing thing in that way. So it was different coming from the same tradition, but thinking about Christmas in different ways. And I in the show, probably Shelley was probably feeling a lot of the same thing. She expressed so many times how she likes the ravens and she likes being around there in the Christmas season, but there's that certain way that she's used to Christmas that she longed for the most. And then maybe even in a way, kind of what I was just saying, Hauling gives her that wonderful gift at the very end. And, we know that John Cullum is, we don't see him on TV or in movies very much because he spent a lot of his career on stage.
Broadway.
And, yeah. So he really is an accomplished singer, and that was wonderful that they could use that talent of his in that way. And I'm sure that probably he was feeling a lot when he was singing that for her during the filming too.
Yeah, that was very poignant. If I could back up just a little bit to the previous question about Christmas traditions, and Barney, I'm hoping that as you grew up Worcester Mennonite Church that you got to experience this. For me, there's just no moment like the end of the church service. Doesn't matter as to the composition of the rest of the service, but when Jacob has us all encircle the entire sanctuary for Silent Night, for me, there's just no moment like that. There's no other moment like that. I always look around at each face because there's such an expression of joy, togetherness, family standing apart sometimes together. For me, that little tradition is just so touching. One other thing, Barney, I wanted to address that I found interesting that you mentioned about a person from the Philippines. Angie and I had a friend from the OERDC from the Philippines, Mary Ann. It was interesting what she said about the Christmas season. She said, "You must come because where I live, it is a month-long celebration unlike anything here that I've seen in the United States." So the contrast there I found interesting from what you said.
Yeah, I would love to have the chance to see that, hearing her the way that she described it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And maybe I can, get something to you via Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
friends there. And,
Yeah. Interesting about Silent Night, how it's, not to get too sidetracked, but it's such an old and traditional song, and we've sung it so many times, but yeah, like you say, there are certain aspects of this season that, we kind of see with Hauling singing, and of course in our own experiences, that the power of hymns and songs that they can have for us in relating to this.
One thing that was very unique about last year's singing of Silent Night is that Yachio Bible Baptist Church sent us a video of them singing Silent Night. So we were able to play that video and then respond and sing Silent Night ourselves. And it just was so special because, as Ken said, it is always a very intimate, unique part of the service where we look at each other. But then in doing it in that way, it's like we were looking at each other, but we're also celebrating our connection with this community of believers across the world. And it just enlarged that circle that's standing around the room now to include these brothers and sisters in Japan. And that was very special. And I remember as a child always liking when we'd sing Silent Night in the service in the church where I grew up, because we turn off down the lights and have candles. And so we kind of continued to do that tradition here at Worcester Mennonite with digital candles. And so it's still very special, I think, for children, not only to see each other in the circle, but to hold that little light and to think about Jesus and like he is the light in our darkness. He's the light of the world. And to stand around and to do that together is very meaningful.
Yeah, I would think Shelley would identify with that moment totally, because of what she was reaching to try to touch and grab, feel.
Absolutely. We have this tradition at Worcester Mennonite that we talked about last year with Ken, and that tradition involves providing meals for our community. And this is something that I love. We had not done that growing up in the church that I had been in, but Worcester Mennonite developed this tradition a number of years back, thanks to Lori Thomas and several other generous volunteers who had this idea. But to give people a hot meal and a place to be on Christmas Eve where they can experience community is so rich and meaningful. And it was so important to us that, as you see in these pictures, we even did it one year in our parking lot during the intense period of the pandemic, where we couldn't have people in the building, but we still wanted to keep the tradition going. And so it was important to be able to still offer something. But this year, we're excited to be able to offer it in the building again. And this is a picture of what it looks like when we do that. We're going to have music from Jen Kinbaum and Jeremy Clevenger. They're generous to share their talents, and volunteers from our church, and sometimes volunteers even from the community. I don't know if we'll have volunteers from the community this year, but it's so special to have that opportunity, and then to just connect with people in the community and serve them, get to know them, and enjoy the time together. And so this is one of those very special traditions unique to Worcester Mennonite Church, but I'm so grateful to have been brought into this tradition and to be a part of the church as we do that. So.
Yeah, one thing I realized about this episode, trying to look at it as a whole, is I think in the end, everyone gets some gift that maybe it wasn't what they thought that they wanted. Maybe it wasn't what they thought that they needed, but everyone ends up getting the right gift that for them. You know, Joel thought maybe the gift that he wanted was a Christmas tree. I think it was just the experience of what it's like to have a tree. And then he realized that it wasn't for him. What was he said? What did he say? You scratch the surface and there's a matzo ball or something. and Maggie thought that the gift that she wanted was to not have to see her family. You know, if it was by injuring herself or however means necessary. And then when she didn't get to see her family over the season, she realized that it wasn't the gift that she wanted at all, but then Joel ends up giving her the right gift. And, you know, Shelley thought that maybe the gift that she wanted was just, you know, being able to spend time at church, you know, before going to the Raven pageant. She's still ready to go to the Raven pageant, but, you know, Holland gave her, you know, the deep love that we already know that they share. He ends up giving her the gift that she wanted. And Maurice says at the beginning of the show how much he wanted that gift of a family, and he didn't think that he got the right one, but he did get the right gift. Yeah. And I don't know, what do you guys think about Chris? The one line for Chris that he sticks with me is when he talks about when he stayed up and heard his dog talk, and then he doesn't say what it was that he said, you know, of course, but that part always sticks with me because I don't quite know that kind of monologue that he has at the end. I can't quite get at what I know that there's something deeper meaning in what he gives us, but how did you guys respond to that? Did that stick out to you in any special way?
Well, to me, I kind of saw it as Chris alluding to the magic of Christmas, which can be a different magic for you and for Jacob and for the rest of the world. But yet, here's hoping your dog talks. You know, what
Yeah, that's
I'll just bring this in briefly because everyone receives certain right gifts in this program. I thought the scene, it was brief, the scene with Ruth Ann, where she declared herself an atheist and then said, in the next breath, "Oh, I believe in a supreme being. It's just that she." So we get that, it was kind of an aside, but yet there's something there.
hmm hmm yeah. Yeah, Ruth Ann is always so interesting. Yeah, and that comment was very good too. And of course, in a few seasons later, the one I'm thinking of when Maurice is trying to get ostriches to lay eggs for him, that she mentions that it saves her so much time for making food for the church. So, she's still some part of her, she's still going to church, even though the supreme being that she believes in.
And how appalled she is at the cutting down of trees to
in
a living, breathing.
Where they live, yes, right. Where they're surrounded by trees. Yeah, I got that too.
Yeah, it's interesting when you boil down some of the unique things that are really valued by the individuals in the episode surrounding Christmas, like returning to Shelley's story. She says the Mass, going to the Mass with that experience, but then at the end of the episode when I am blanking on the name of her companion. Holling. When Holling sings Ave Maria for her and he has candles lit, that is enough of the experience of like the core of the whatever the essence or that thought that reminds her of the Mass, the fact that he would decorate that space, create that space, that holy moment for her when she comes in, and he would sing that song that would be so central to that tradition she was raised in, that she would be very moved. And I don't know, it's interesting, like sometimes it's subtle, but like the thing that means so much to us can be expressed just by somebody who loves us in a way that's very simple, but it can have great meaning. It doesn't always have to be that you get the exact thing that you were thinking of in its fullness, but even a small gesture, a small expression of that. And I thought that was a very touching part of the story, that he did what he could, and that was enough. That was very meaningful to her. And maybe some of the things that we mentioned earlier, like I was talking about the children decorating the tree. Well, even if we didn't have a tree to decorate, if you boil it down, it's doing something meaningful with the family, and so sometimes the traditions we have, there's a deeper core of which is just the essential part that we really appreciate. And Barney, you had asked earlier too about things that we have experienced that were outside of what we're used to and kind of having new meaning. Well, I didn't grow up in a liturgical church, but Katie had this practice. She grew up in the Methodist church, and they had used an Advent wreath throughout the season of Advent. And each week, different member of the family would light a different candle, and there would be a scripture reading and a prayer that would go along with that until finally you reach Christmas. And at that part, all the candles are lit. And we started doing that in our family, and that's a really interesting tradition, kind of going back again, like we said earlier, the idea of light and the story being told is a reminder of Jesus being light in our life. And it was just some of these practices are so inspiring and meaningful, and even how light is talked about in the episode in the story of the raven, light being such an important part of a symbol of hope and of life that we all can appreciate.
And the fact that they chose to do a full-on production of the Raven pageant at the end.
Yes.
And, panning the faces out there again brought for me the memory of Silent Night on Christmas Eve, because that was their Silent Night moment as audience to this incredible story that was so well done.
Yeah. I also thought, I bet for sure that what they're showing us is the genuine, what ceremonial that they would do, and a few times I thought, I wonder, how would this episode be received today? Because the things that the episode talks about and shows us, and the time that they spend on these different traditions, it was very daring back then even, but it was just masterfully done. And it's this artwork that we end up with that really should, sadly, it's still unavailable by streaming. People don't get around to, getting the DVDs, even though they're out there,
Right.
And it's really something for people to see and really open themselves up to in relation to the Christmas season. And I wonder if maybe the writers were thinking themselves, how many of us watching have a little bit of Maurice in us, and are going to be a little reluctant to see an episode about ravens when we're expecting to see Christmas trees and Christmas carols and things like that. And they show us that, there's a lot else to be appreciated, a lot of other things about Christmas that maybe we have to think about in terms of ourselves too.
Well said.
Are there any other questions or thoughts that either of you have before we conclude our episode?
We want to say again that we're so thankful for you joining us today and sticking with us as we talked about this episode from Northern Exposure, the third season, I believe, called Seoul Mates. And we hope that especially if you've seen the episode, that maybe you gain some new insights to the show, the story that we did as well today while watching it again and even talking about it now. And we hope that maybe it puts you in mind of the reasons why you appreciate, or the things about this season that you find that you appreciate or look forward to or hang on to. And again, as we saw at the end of the episode, the idea of light, and light being hope, and light being something that we should share with all those around us. And we hope that you will continue tuning in with us as we talk about different topics, and as we have another Northern Exposure episode to talk about in a few weeks' time as well. And so I am Barney, and we're very grateful to have Ken with us today, and of course Jacob too. And we always appreciate you being with us, and we look forward to the next episode and hope that you will too. And we'll see you again for the Two World Podcast. See you next time.